Well, here we are. It's time for another edition of Jonesing for Football as we reach the end of the month of June and training camps are not far away. Bill Jones with young Cody Winstead, and we've got a very special guest. Cody, for the past few weeks, has talked about the A-list guest that he's going to have here from his work on the NFL Network, and he has come through in a huge way with Mike Giardi. Cody, would you like to do the honors of giving the official introduction for Mr. Giardi?
I'd love to. Good to see you, Mr. Jones. And today we're lucky enough to be joined by one of the best reporters at the NFL Network. I've worked alongside him for the last few seasons. He does a great job covering the Patriots, the AFC East, and you know what? Really just the whole league in general. The best dressed man at NFL Network. Let's say hello to Mike Giardi. Giardi, what's up, man?
Did you notice there that he said, I'm one of the best reporters at the NFL Network, and there's probably like 8 of us? So that it doesn't really narrow it down too much.
No. One of the top 8 reporters at NFL Network. How about I go with that?
That's beautiful. You don't want to offend anybody. I'll take that.
That's
all
right.
Well,
hey,
and
thanks for
you're
joining
us. one of the best reporters, but the best dressed reporter.
Yes, I'll take
thought
that.
That's what you were going to focus on. And see, I was trying to prop up your outfit, man.
Can I tell Palmer and Pelissero to stick it now that you've declared me that? Is that my bragging rights?
Don't let either of them know. Don't let either of them know I said you're the best dressed, because I might use that line on them if they ever come on the podcast.
Cody,
Nice.
Can I let James Slater know that here in Dallas?
Good. You're definitely. Dang, I should have thought about that. You're one of the best 8 dressed reporters at NFL Network too. I think is what we're learning.
Okay, he's already learned the fine art of not getting. Well, he got himself in trouble, but he's learning. He's processing here. I can't make these dramatic statements and then not have it come back on me.
That's right.
All right. So Cody and I, of course, it's been well documented on the Jonesing for Football podcast. Mike, you can see how well trained he was here in Dallas. He's got the sign Jonesing for Football over his shoulder right there. So we go way back. Quickly, before we get started talking Patriots and other stuff, Cody, fill me in on your how much you've worked with Giardi, just how it works at the NFL Network level as far as producers working with reporters and so forth.
Yeah. So obviously the Patriots have been extremely featured on the NFL Network over the last few years. And obviously Giardi does a great job covering them. And so we would have him on our weekend show all the time. I mean, the Patriots are playing in huge games all the time. Therefore, Giardi's one of our featured reporters over the last few years. And clearly with Brady and winning the Super Bowls, that was the situation. And now that it looks like they're going to be back in the playoff mix, I'm assuming that's the case again. So he and I were always in contact. It's always great to have him on our shows on Saturday morning. And I know, so this is how good of a guy Mike Giardi is. He's on our show bright and early, 9 a.m. through noon. And then I know he rushes to his son's football games, at least in the past, because he was offensive coordinator. So if something ever happened to Josh McDaniels, we got to replace it right here.
So how old's your son?
He's just turned 15.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So are you still the OC?
This is it. Last year was the last year for it. You know, he goes up another level here, and that's I hang up my coaching hat. I just become a fan now. So I can second guess the offensive coordinator.
There you go. That's a good place to be. You should apply for that job. Maybe that'd be perfect.
And then we'll be designing every play for him. I don't know if that'd be good or not.
That's right. You don't want to deal with the parents at that level.
That's right.
Trust me. All right. Okay. So that brings me to my first question, talking about the New England Patriots, because I think Cody has probably let you know, Mike, there's a guy who played for the Patriots, who I've been following since he was about 15 years old at Plano Senior High School. And I just don't know how in the world the Patriots are going to be able to survive without my guy, Rex Burkhead, on the team, as Rex is now a Houston Texan.
You know what? We're joking, obviously, about his impact, but he's been an important guy for them. Versatile, someone that Bill trusted, someone that the quarterbacks trusted, someone that Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator, trusted, and obviously the knee injury last year and sort of the depth that they have at running back, you know, sort of essentially led to the parting of ways. But he was a pretty important guy here for some time, and someone that Bill certainly Bill Belichick certainly appreciated the contributions, not just offensively, but special teams as well. Like he's a pretty good story and a self-made guy. And I think one of the nicest things, one of the best things I can say about him is he's one of the nicest guys that have ever come through there. Just absolutely as polite as can be. Ask you about your family, the whole 9 yards, just top-notch guy.
Let me add to that. This was back in probably 2009 or so. I hosted a statewide award show, high school football award show, and he got the Texas State Player of the Year award. And I said, when he came up on stage, and I didn't really know him at the time, or I now know him and his dad pretty well. I said, this guy right here, he reminds me of Wes Welker. At that time, of course, he was smaller, but he was a running back. And I thought he might be, he has the skills to play slot receiver. I said, this guy right here is going to play for Bill Belichick one day in the National Football League. And the reason I said that was because he had all those qualities that Bill Belichick is looking for in a player, which brings me to my question about Bill Belichick. You are a guy you were covering the Patriots when Belichick got the job in 2000. Just put in to 20 years of 2 decades of experience covering him, just the magnitude of what Bill Belichick has done there in New England.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Obviously the Patriots franchise was never much of anything. They had a brief run in the late 70s. Then that team broke up. Ownership was a mess. The stadium was a disaster. Bob Kraft comes and buys the team. They get Parcells. They have a run with Bledsoe. But it was really Belichick coming in, and Belichick had established a relationship with the Krafts when he was he was an assistant. He wasn't even the DC for the Patriots for that one season, and really established a relationship. And when they brought him back, there were some people questioning, like, "Hey, really, this is going to be your big hire here?" But he established sort of the culture and the program, and now 20 years later, you have all those Super Bowls, all those trips to AFC title games. And, there's just an expectation around here. Like last year was unacceptable for the fans because they're used to winning and being in the mix every year. But I think more importantly, unacceptable to Bill. And I think that's why you saw sort of the reaction that they had this offseason and the way they approached this offseason. 7-9 is not good enough. And that's, I think it was the first losing season since early 2000s. Like it just doesn't happen. I mean, they went 11-5 when Brady blew out his knee. I mean, I'll just tell you everything you need to know about sort of the program they built here and sort of the requirements there are to be a Patriot and the expectations to be a Patriot. That's to win every Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, whenever the heck you're going to play your games.
So that leads me, Giardi, this is teased me up pretty well here. They spend, like you mentioned, over $200 million in free agency, right? When I think of Belichick, I don't think of like, we got to win this year. I think of someone who's collected, he thinks through these plans. He has an elaborate scheme developed. I'm kind of surprised by this win now mentality that it seems like they're in. Were you at all surprised?
I thought they were going to spend. I didn't know that it was going to be to that effect. I mean, look, there was a unique situation based on the cap and the way their cap had set up. So, in the aftermath of the spending, they all talk about the idea of, well, look, normally in free agency, you're competing with 10, 12 teams for these players. But because of the cap situation and so many teams either being right up against it or already over, they were one of the few teams that had this, they had 70 million or something going into the free agency. So they had this opportunity to add players that they normally wouldn't, or add players that, they would have found themselves in competition with all these other teams. And maybe they would have, the guy would have said, you know what, I'm going to go play in, Chicago and not New England. Well, no, New England could come in a little bit higher than some of these teams could. And all of a sudden you have this just crazy collection of free agent spending and talent that they brought in. But even though they say all that, and I think that obviously is true, all the facts I brought up about the finances, the 7-9 is the thing that stuck. And the disgust in being 7-9, from the players to Bill, right on top to the Krafts in ownership. Like, we don't do this. This is not how it's going to go. So even had there been more competition for free agents, I still think they would have spent and they would have added, because I think they realized, quarterback was an issue for them last year, but there were so many other things and so many such a drop off, if you will, in talent across the board. And they said we got to get better. And I mean, clearly, at least on paper, and from what I saw at OTAs and minicamp, they did that.
Yeah. Okay. So you were there for OTAs and minicamp. So who is it that has stood out to you as far as a newcomer? And of course, they added so many both on offense and defense, and then they had opt-out guys as well. Dante Hightower was back at the mandatory minicamp after, I guess, working out on his own prior to that. You tweeted that he made a diving interception in one minicamp practice, so he looks to be good to go. So who's the guy who's going to make the most impact, you think? Or would it be a coach like Matt Patricia coming back?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Patricia's sort of like the mystery man. He's been out there, but Bill won't really tell us what he's doing. So we'll see how that all plays out. I would love to start with Hightower because I think we were all curious to see what he looked like after a year away. And, he's dealt with some injuries, and there were some rumblings that maybe he just wasn't going to come back, that he sort of liked life away from the NFL and letting his body heal, just had a baby, got married, the whole 9 yards. And when I saw him, looks a little bit leaner, like nothing dramatic, but maybe there's a 5-pound difference there, but just, he brought all the things that we're used to seeing. And he brought that athleticism, and he's someone who marries the front and the back. Like, he just knows what he's doing. So, you bring back Kyle Van Noy, you add Matthew Judon, but to have Hightower in the middle sort of controlling everything is massive for the football team. And I think you saw his impact in minicamp just right away, sort of just like he hadn't skipped a beat and was able to sort of adjust with those guys. And that looks like, we're obviously in shorts and t-shirts, so you're not getting full contact, but their front seven was bad last year. We spent so much time talking about the quarterback and the offense. They got the ball shoved down their throat so many times last year. And that was about as uncommon as anything I've seen in the last 2 decades with a Belichick coach football team. And I just think having Hightower and sort of how they're going to be able to move pieces around on that defensive front and some of the combinations they're going to be able to utilize, they're going to get back to being an aggressive attack style defense. And they couldn't be that last year, or when they tried, they just didn't have the horses to do it. They've got the horses now. So that to me is something that really stands out.
And in regards to their defense and their front seven, that is something where statistics can lie, where it's how games play out, where you rank maybe points allowed. I think they're 7th in the league in points allowed last year, and they were 15th overall in defense. But that didn't mean they had a good defense last year. When your offense is not producing, other teams don't have to do that much offensively. And so statistically, you might rank much higher than how strong your defense really is.
Yeah, when they had to stop somebody last year, they couldn't. And that's just really uncommon for the way they built their teams. And even last year going into it, I'm sure we'll get into Cam and what went on with Cam and the offense. But okay, I think the plan was, in turning the offense over to Cam, was we're going to be a power running football team with Cam as one of the featured guys. But our defense is going to be good enough that we're going to be able to win games 20-17, 21-17, 24-21. And their defense just could not do it. And I think there was points in the year, especially late, where you're just like, everybody knows it. Like, they knew it. They could feel it. Like, here it goes again. They're running down our throat, and we have no personnel. There's no scheme. There's nothing we can do to change that.
Hey, wait a second. Okay, Cody, I know you're begging to ask the next question, but I just got to throw this in. You think it was bad watching New England's run defense? Try being in Dallas last year.
Yeah, that did not go well in Dallas.
You want to see a bad run defense?
Yeah.
Watch the Cowboys 2020 tape. Go ahead, Cody.
Yeah. So Giardi, we mentioned the defense. How concerned are you with the pass rush? Because we've talked about stopping the run. They only had, I think, 24 sacks last year, which obviously is an emphasis for them coming back this year. How much do you think they can be better in that area as well?
Well, as I sort of mentioned, like the different combinations they can utilize now in the front seven, we saw some things in minicamp. They're known for this, or they were a couple of years ago, the amoeba defense, where maybe there was one guy with his hand in the dirt and then 10 bodies all scattered within, a few yards of the line of scrimmage. And you're like, is he coming? Is he coming? They didn't have the personnel to do that last year, but in adding Van Noy, Hightower's back, Josh Uche in his second year, I think there's a chance for him to make a big leap. Judon, Chase Winovich, who was one of their probably better defenders last year, even though he was inconsistent last year, he wasn't even really working with the ones at all during the course of mandatory minicamp. And I'm looking at it and saying, like, you could take those 5 guys right there in passing situations and throw them on the field with a couple big bodies and say, go ahead, figure out who you're going to block. Some of these guys are going to get one-on-one, and they're all good pass rushers. Not great, but they're all good individuals. So, one-on-one matchups, they've always done a good job of seeking out, like, hey, the right guard is no good, so we're going to take our best pass rusher in this game. And in those spots, whether it was Trey Flowers back in the day, or they would always isolate that guy. They didn't have the personnel to do that last year. I think they have the personnel, if they stay healthy, to do that this year. And I think that's where you'll see, not just sack numbers, but just in general impacting the passer, which, of course, as we know, if you marry the pass rush with the coverage you get in the back end, I think the defense can take that step and be a top 5 defense again. And that's huge for them, because I still don't know what the offense is going to look like.
Yeah, that's the thing. They've got Belichick. What he does is he acquires players who are versatile and they are smart. And so they can understand concepts and what they're trying to do defensively. Okay, we're going to switch to offense next. But first off, Stephon Gilmore. He's been a holdout. So what are the chances that Gilmore does not show up?
I'd say the chances are good that he doesn't show up if they don't pay him. I mean, Steph's a smart dude, and I think he and his agent have gone back and looked at who has won these battles with the Patriots. And there are so many guys that sort of just, they relent to the Patriot and they take less money. And I think Steph looks at it and says, 2 years ago, I was the defensive player of the year, and after a slow start, he was playing great before he tore his quad. And I think he looks at their team now, especially with what they did in free agency, and said, you know what you're missing? You're missing me. And when we watch that defense in mandatory minicamp, the pieces are all there except for that number 1 corner. And he's, we talk about the number 1 corner, he gets thrown around a lot, but there are very few guys that are quote unquote number 1 corners in this league that travel with the best guy. And Steph is one of those guys that does it. If that guy's in the slot, Steph will go in the slot. If he's out wide, he'll go out wide. If he's motioning in the backfield, Steph's running with him. That player, that level of player, and when he's playing at that level, that helps take that defense to a different place. So, I think what I'm sort of envisioning here is them coming to some sort of an agreement where it's just based on this year. They don't want to give him 3 years or 4 years like I'm sure he wants. But okay, you're only on the books for $7.5 million this year. That's way too low for a cornerback of your caliber. They've got about $15 million under the cap right now. And as we know, you can still play with that. So to me, I think they got to get him up around 15 to 17 million for this season, maybe promise him no franchise tag and let him play it out. And I think that makes the most sense for him, because I think he'll be motivated. And I think that makes the most sense for them, because they don't have to give him a long-term commitment, but they get the player in the short term. And the goals in the short term are to be a lot better than 7-9 this year.
All right, Giardi, let's switch to the offense. Obviously, the quarterback position's what everyone's paying attention to there. Just what were your takeaways from Cam and from Mac and Cheese, right? That's what we're calling him during mandatory minicamp last week.
Cam's calling him Mac and Cheese. I will not be calling him Mac and Cheese.
Oh, okay.
I was, as someone who during the draft process started to get more familiar with Mac, I sort of had this thing in my head, like, Mac's just another one of these Alabama guys. He's AJ McCarron. I couldn't get that out of my head. And then you started to watch him and you're like, one of the things that stands out about him, even though I know he was surrounded by a ton of talent, was the accuracy. The ball was always where it needed to be. And you can say, well, guys are running free by 3 or 4 yards. Well, you can watch other quarterbacks and they're still putting the ball back over here. They're putting the ball down by the knees and the receiver makes the catch, but maybe that eliminates yards after catch. He was putting the ball on the spot all the time. And it's already started to carry over, I think, to what we saw during the OTAs and the minicamp. And look, there's some highs and lows. He had some moments on Tuesday at the end of practice in 11-on-11s in mandatory minicamp where he threw a couple balls. You're like, you can't do that in the NFL level. And on Wednesday, he had a down day, which really was the first down day that he'd had during the time that we've been able to watch him. But you still see things like the decisiveness, sort of quick processing, the ball coming out when he's making those decisions, especially in the short to intermediate stuff. It seems like it's always the right decision. And I think it's an inevitability that he's going to be the starting quarterback for this team at some point this year. But I still think Cam is the odds-on favorite to begin the year for a lot of reasons. I think, Cam had a great final day of mandatory minicamp where he looked like, all the things that they said about, getting signed late last year, late June, and then really having to play catch up with the playbook and never quite fully feeling comfortable with it. On Wednesday of last week, he looked like it all clicked. Like he was seeing everything the way he was supposed to see it. The ball was coming out. There was less patting of the football, less shuffling of the feet. But I think what Josh McDaniels wants to do with his offense, what he did with his offense for 20 years, is what Mac does well and what they project Mac to do well. So I look at Cam and say, I think he's the kind of the seat warmer, the placeholder for September. Give Mac a little bit more time to sort of ingratiate himself into the pro game and sort of understand what's going on, see those reps that Cam takes, learn what he can and cannot do. And then, like, I even have a week scheduled. Week 5 to me is the one that makes the most sense, right? Am I jumping the gun here, Cody?
That's exactly where I was going.
Well, so
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, like, so if you look at their schedule, the first month, they play 3 teams that were in the top 6 in pass defense last year of the 4 games they play in the first month, including Tampa Bay, which is week 4. Now I don't know if you guys can feel the buzz down there or where you are, Cody, but here, that is the biggest game ever. It's bigger than Super Bowls because it's Tom Brady coming to Foxborough. The fans didn't want him to go. He went. The team went 7-9. Now you've drafted a quarterback. Like, is this the next Tom Brady? There's all this stuff. And look, if Mac blows doors in August, he'll be the starting quarterback. If he just runs away from Cam, I think Bill will play him. But ideally, I think you shelter him from that. You shelter him from that hype and being compared side by side across every broadcast from here to the West Coast for that entire week, maybe beyond, about, well, is Mac the next guy, and comparing him to Tom. And if you know Tom, as cutthroat a competitor ever, like, Tom will want to crush. He wants to crush Bill. He wants to crush everybody. He'll want to crush Mac. And I just think, I don't think Mac's fragile, but I just think it's one of those things where week 5.
Let's just avoid it.
Yeah, what's the point? Like, just and take your lumps, lose the game to Tampa. You're 2-2 in my head. That's how I have it, 2-2. Cam, thanks for everything. Mac's the quarterback. And then from weeks 5 to 12, they play, again, this is based on last year's numbers, but they play a bunch of teams that were in the bottom 25% in pass defense. So, and sort of a soft landing for the kid. Get rid of Tampa, make the switch, turn the page, and now it's yours, kid. Go.
And so that 5th game would be at Houston, and then week 6, Dallas comes to New England. So there you go. That's a great launching point for Mac Jones. It's interesting. You bring up Brady going back to New England. It reminds me of 25 years ago. The Cowboys were coming off their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. In the 1996 season, Jimmy Johnson was the head coach at Miami, and it was about mid-season. The Cowboys played at Miami, and you obviously you would understand how much we played up that matchup. Jerry Jones and the Cowboys going to Miami to take on Jimmy Johnson and the Dolphins. It's similar dynamics there as Tom Brady going back to take on New England. The other thing, Cody, but go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say, we have 2 sports radio stations in town that compete, and they have been talking about Brady versus Belichick since the day Brady left. And now you have this date on the horizon, and they're still talking about it. It's summer. Like, hey, let's talk Red Sox are a good team this year. The NBA draft is happening. Like, the Bruins just flamed out in the playoffs. Do they run it back, or do they have to make changes? What continues to get play on Boston radio from morning until midnight is Tom Brady versus Bill Belichick, Tampa Bay versus the Patriots at Gillette. It's unbelievable.
Oh, Mike, I long for those days in the 90s, the Cowboys, when it didn't matter what time of the year it was, we're leading with the Cowboys, baby. I mean, back then, Mike, we could, what the restrictions are for media now, especially coming out of COVID, but even before that, 25 years ago, from 1990 to 97, I covered the Cowboys for the NBC affiliate here. And in the off season, we literally, myself and a photographer, Kerry Smith, our sports photographer at NBC5 back then, we would go on a slow day in the off season. We would just go sit in the Cowboys locker room at Valley Ranch and wait for Michael Irvin or Troy Aikman to come off the practice field from their off season. They were just working out on their own there. Yeah. We had that kind of access at the place. So anyway, okay.
That's glorious, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If I show up at Gillette Stadium when we're not invited, the SWAT team might come out and get me. It's like you got to be real careful these days.
Right. Now, they built the Star in Frisco here. Now we are in a totally separate building doing our work than where all the players and coaches are now. And we used to have to walk by the coaches' offices just to get to the locker room, or where Cowboys TV. I do a lot of work for Cowboys TV. And so you just bump into coaches, even in the restroom, and you get so many tips on, okay, who's doing what. Hey, Cody, you heard the analysis that Mike gave on Mac Jones, okay, at minicamp in OTAs. You saw the coach in him right there when he was talking about him, because I can't get past the number 50 on his jersey. I would not be able to say, I don't know anything about his accuracy. A quarterback wearing number 50, I just can't get past that.
Are they selling those, Giardi, in Boston?
No, so I don't even remember when this started. It's been at least several years now. The Bills thing is you have to earn your jersey as a rookie or undrafted guy. So 50 is the first pick in your draft. 51 is the second, so forth. Barmore's wearing 51, so on and so forth. So I got to tell you, it's kind of grown on me as I'm looking at all these videos I took of him. I'm like, yeah, I don't really mind 50. It's all right. I mean, it's uncommon, but it's all right.
And I had to think, okay, with the jersey number changes this year now,
can he do it?
Yeah. I looked that up. Well, first of all, I think that's going to be like the sickest throwback in Boston, like over the next 10 years. The Mac Jones 50 jersey. Like you walk into the club wearing that. Everyone's like, yeah, that's my man. Right?
I want to know, what did Brady wear? Of course, he would have been, if he was doing the same thing, being a 6th round pick, it didn't matter. Right?
Yeah, no, and back then that wasn't a thing. I don't even Bill is known to throw curveballs, especially whatever.
So
and everybody
like,
yeah, he likes to. There was a stretch there, and I think it's actually now been banned, where they would have practice with no numbers on the helmet, no numbers on the jerseys. And the media complained because you're like, I think that's so and so. I mean, it's obviously certain guys would stand out, but you're like, I don't know who the hell that is. And he claims it wasn't for the media. He claims it was for the players. So you have to know the other guy. You have to I want you to know his name. You don't call out number 50. That's Mac. I want you to. Whether I believe that or not, I'm not sure, but that's how they sold it.
Hey, Mike McCarthy did it last year. We had an open scrimmage, of course, without any preseason games last year. They had actually an open scrimmage that we televised, and of course we had strict orders. We can't show a quarterback throwing a pass in the scrimmage. It had to be ISO shots. You can't show where the ball went or anything. But there were no numbers, and so the media is sitting there going, "Who are these people?"
Sounds great.
It's crazy. Like you're talking about what it was like in the 90s covering them. Even in the early 2000s with Bill, it wasn't as buttoned down as it is now. It still is just football. Like a guy, so a guy throws a pass, like no one's gonna. I can't shoot. So we do these digital hits for NFL.com, and they're like, if you're at the facility, you're at the practice, shoot it with practice behind you. Well, we can't do that. They don't want. I'm like, okay, so if I have the camera on my face, there's a guy 75 yards behind me. Like, you're not going to even know who the hell that is. And no, can't do it. You're not allowed to do it. Like, we're not. Someone can see it. Someone can see what? The guy, stretching behind me. Like, whatever.
Right. Yeah, we got to follow along. Unfortunately, we got to follow the rules. Hey, let me just quickly, one more thing on Mac. Giardi, what was the fan base reception when Mac got drafted? Was there hesitation there? Hey, he doesn't look athletic. Hey, he played with a bunch of great players at Alabama? How hard was his job? What was just the fan base, the overall temperature from them?
I would say the majority were excited for it because the majority didn't like watching Cam last year. Fair. So the feeling was like, oh, yeah, there are all these things that you just mentioned, the question marks about him, but the guy who was here for 20 years wasn't the most athletic dude, but he made his living on that short to intermediate stuff, pick you apart, run after catch by putting the ball in the spot. So people could see, you don't want to compare him to Tom Brady, but you could see some of the similarities in terms of how they want to run their offense. And, there was some rumblings about Garoppolo and that, that got hot and heavy for a little bit, but that price never came down from San Francisco. I think people would have accepted that as well. But I think now they're just sort of genuinely excited about the idea of like, well, you've never drafted a first round quarterback. You drafted one. The reports so far are good. He's certainly, in talking to, people inside the building, he's picking up the playbook like crazy. Like he's just feeding off this stuff. And that's, again, a great sign. So, I think people are genuinely excited about what this kid could be. And do we have the quarterback of the next decade? So because we know how important that is in the league.
Yeah, for sure. I worked with Scott Pioli when I produced a couple draft shows right around draft time. And obviously he has close ties to the Patriots and Belichick. And he actually has close ties to Alabama. I think he worked with them last season. But he mentioned on our show that during the pre-draft process, he and Mac were talking, and Mac told him specifically, I don't care about anything, but I know that I am best suited to go to the Patriots. And we know there was a bunch of talk on Mac. Could he go to the Niners? Where could he fall in that top 10? But according to Pioli, Mac told him specifically, I want to go play for the Patriots. Has that been brought up? Has Mac talked about that?
Yeah, he said that was what he wanted. He said it was, it's like a dream come true to be able to come there. And so in all the years I've been here, I mean, they drafted Ryan Mallett, I think, in the third round. They drafted Kevin O'Connell, who washed out pretty quickly, but now is in the fast track as a coach. I think he was a third round pick. Brissett was a third round pick. Stidham was a fourth round pick. Garoppolo was the highest pick, second, but it was a late second. And sort of going back over my notes, especially in the recent ones with Brissett, Stidham, and Garoppolo, Josh McDaniels spent way more time one-on-one with Mac than he did with any of those guys. And I think part of me, I think Josh was part of the driving force behind that pick. I think Josh, identifies him as someone that would work in this offense. But I just think they see the stuff that we're talking about, the ability to pick up the playbook. Like, here's Cam, who's been in the league for 10 years, and the system was designed around him, but he struggled to pick it up. And here's Mac, drafted in April, and they're throwing stuff at him in June. And for most of it, he's absorbing it and he's doing the right thing. And I think that gets them really excited about, what the future could be like with number 50 at the helm.
The ability to process quickly is so huge for a quarterback in this league. Along those lines with Cam, seriously, how much, looking back to last year, it wasn't until July before he was signed by the Patriots. And then with a training camp that was reduced in terms of no games and also just weeks. They didn't have much time to prepare. How much will a full off season, having played there for a year and a full off season in the system, help Cam, you think?
Well, that last mandatory minicamp that I mentioned, I think that was the best I've seen him look at any point in the year that he's been here, just in terms of everything seemed to be flowing through him, and it was flowing in the right direction. There weren't these head scratching decisions or these times where he's holding the ball in the pocket, in a 7-on-7. You're like, dude, just you can't take a sack in a 7-on-7. Like, just tuck it and run. I don't care, but just do something. And I think you could see at times last year, this is what they want me to do. This is what my instincts are telling me to do, but I can't quite, he never had that feel like he was Cam. And I think the other thing for me, he's had 2 shoulder surgeries. And I think at times last year, like, his mechanics have never been ideal, but he always had such a big arm that he could still make all the throws because he had power. So even if his feet weren't right, even if he wasn't working his core properly when he threw the ball, he could still fire it, on a rope. Last year, he didn't have that, and how much did COVID affect him? You know, I know in talking to people in the building, the 2 games that he had coming back after COVID, they essentially, when they evaluated him this offseason before re-signing him, they said, we took those games and we threw him out. You know, he wasn't the same. And, you know, he talked a little bit about, you know, sort of the COVID fog, and a couple of times coming over the ball and being like, I'm supposed to say this, I think, you know, like I've been doing this since July, but I can't, you know, like it just wasn't, things weren't there. So, and they looked at it and they said, hey, there's 4 or 5 games in that stretch of the 13 that he played, if you throw the 2 COVID games out, where we can do that. We can work with that. So I think that was part of the reason to bring him back. I think there's also, like, with him, you know, last year over and over again, you heard Bill and Josh praise him for the work he put in and the amount of time he spent with guys and in the locker room and just doing whatever he could to, you know, make it work. And I think they almost felt like they owe him a little bit. Like, we didn't, you know, they overvaluated their offensive talent a little bit a lot last year. and you know, like, what did we surround him with? You know, Julian gets hurt
to dry, right?
Yeah, Julian gets hurt. I think their tight ends had 18 catches last year. They were only in 2 or 3 tight end, the lowest in the league, 3%. Like, this is the team that they love the 2 tight end. They couldn't do it because they didn't have tight ends. They weren't healthy or they weren't good. You know, like, it never happened. You know, Jacoby Myers ends up becoming their best receiver. And in a perfect world, Jacoby's a 3 or a 4. He was your best guy. And he did a hell of a job last year, but, like, that's what he was surrounded with. So now it's Hunter Henry, it's Jonnu Smith, it's Nelson Aguilar, it's Kendrick Bourne. It's, okay, Cam, we're giving you an opportunity now. We're going to put pieces around you, and we're going to give you a chance to show that you deserve to be that guy starting in September. And I think it's a huge training camp. Like, I still have him as, like I said, I think he's the guy who begins the year for a lot of reasons, but there's a real competition, and he's going to have to be better than Mac, you know, and he's going to have to prove to them, like, he deserves it. And last year was not who he is, and that with the talent around him, he can be back to maybe 2018 Cam, because we can all agree 2015 Cam is a thing of the past.
So do you think, okay, so let's talk about just the adjustments offensively. Do you feel like they're going to be kind of a ground and pound team and then a play action, or are they going to be more of a, you know, more balanced? You know, what do you think for this offense is best suited for them now that, like you said, they kind of have, you know, they have average to above average players at all the skill positions? Yeah,
look, I still look at receiver and say they're one short. Like, and I didn't love anything that I saw from Aguilar or Kendrick Bourne during the course of you know, the period that we got. And I think it's going to be a big training camp for those guys as well. But there is an upgrade. I think if Cam is the guy, it's definite ground and pound, and it's definitely featuring those 2 tight ends. And look, Devin Asiasi was a guy they picked in the 3rd round last year, tight end out of UCLA, who had no impact on the season a year ago, but looked pretty good during this portion of shorts and t-shirts work. And I wonder, you know, if we're seeing a little bit of some growth from him, and now you have a 3rd tight end, which I think is kind of important too with Hunter Henry, because he's had a tendency to not be able to make it through entire seasons. But, like, I think that's where they look at it and say, big guys, good catch radius, create some mismatch potential. You know, like, if you want to, Jonnu runs so well. Do you want to cover Jonnu with a linebacker? Not too many guys can run with him that way with his size, you know? Okay, well, then are you going to put a safety on him? Well, now he's got the size advantage where he can block those guys out. I think they didn't have those matchups last year. And I think between that and then adding Trent Brown back into the mix on the offensive line, I mean, he's just a massive human being. They've got him at right tackle right now. They have that potential to be sort of that ball control power. And even if you go back, I know I'm skipping around here a little bit, but even if you go back to 2018 when they won the Super Bowl over the Rams, when that team made the turn late in the year, even with Tom Brady at the quarterback, they became a ground and pound. They were a run-first football team. Yeah, Brady had a hell of a game in the AFC title game in Kansas City and made throws that few guys, you know, can make in this league. But by and large, that run was based on the offensive line, power running game, and play action football. And I think that's what you're probably looking at. You know, certainly if Cam's the guy, and even, you know, if Mac is the guy, I think that's the best way to kind of let him feel comfortable early on and maybe eliminate some of those reads, give him a high, low, and that's it. You don't have to see the whole field. Just see this over here.
So the team to beat in the East is Buffalo, right?
Yeah, I still think, we spent so much time talking about Tampa retaining all their guys and having all 22 starters come back. I think Buffalo did just as good a job in free agency as Tampa did. There were real questions when the season ended, whether they could afford to bring back Matt Milano, their terrific linebacker. They got him back. Whether they could afford Darrell Williams, their right tackle, did a really nice job for them last year. They did. They switch out John Brown for Emmanuel Sanders. I think that's an even swap for them. And I just think that team they took the step last year. You can feel this sort of confidence as the year went on building. And now, what does Josh Allen have in store for us? What's that offense have in store for us? And I think there's another level for them to go to. So, yeah, to me, I think the gap closed a little bit. I think the Patriots certainly made it a little bit tighter, but Buffalo is still, to me, the team to beat.
I think it's amazing. We actually talked about this multiple times on the show last year, and obviously the Bills ended up making the AFC title game. But I asked the question a couple times, do we really think the Bills can win the Super Bowl? To me, that just seems weird. Bill Jones, I'll ask you, do you think the Bills, and Giardi,
young
Bills
Cody,
win the Super Bowl?
You're too young to remember when the Bills were playing in Super Bowls.
I do remember barely, but I'm saying, can the Bills win the Super Bowl? Is that realistic?
To answer your question, no, they can get there, as they proved in the 90s. They can't win the Super Bowl, though.
There you go.
That's cold. So cold. Yeah, look, I think they're going to be a handful. I really do. And I think if you look at, again, we're just big picturing it right now before they've even done anything in anger yet. But Kansas City, having to remake their entire offensive line, and then Kyle Long's already hurt. There are things there that, I think the door is open for several teams. And I think the Bills certainly are one of those teams. And I hate to bring this up, but I'm going to, because I think it's been certainly a pretty heavy topic. The whole vaccine thing, Cole Beasley and Cole have been very strong about, I'm not getting vaccinated. That team has had a lot of discussions about that, maybe more so both privately and publicly than any of the ones that I cover. And I'm curious to see if there's any sort of impact on that between players and, what are you doing? Why aren't you getting that? We want to be together. We want to do this together. And I don't know that we know the threshold just yet. 85% is the number that's been thrown around, but I don't think that's been officially, nailed down yet by the league and the PA. But I wonder if they're going to be a team that's under the 85%. And there are some disadvantages to that, I think, clearly. Being able to meet in person, you talk to all these coaches and they're like, this Zoom stuff, fine, it did what it had to do, but being able to do it in person is a totally different thing. And the advantages to that and being able to get back to that are, I think, huge. When you talk to all these guys that they really want their guys back in the building and they want them all together.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Let's talk about another team that you cover, the Dolphins. I love me some Tua Tagovailoa. Give me your take, Giardi. Are you a believer? Are you still a believer? Are you not a believer? Where do you fall on Tua entering year two?
We're not supposed to defend guys. That's not my job as a reporter. But I thought that the rush to judgment on him is so ridiculous. He played 9 games after destroying his hip, and essentially, I think he is ahead of schedule to even get on the field and to play those 9 games. So did it look great? Nope. Was he too conservative? Yep. Was the play calling around him too conservative? Yep. Does that have to change if they're going to realize the potential that's there? And I think that's a really good roster. And Brian Flores has really built it in the right direction. He's got to elevate, but I think that he has the potential to elevate. I can't after 9 games say this guy doesn't have it. I just think that's ridiculous. If we did that with Josh Allen, it was over. He was done. Right. And Josh Allen, could have very well have been the MVP last year. So you got to give these guys
after 20 plus games of Josh.
Yeah, Allen. Exactly. I watched him. Hell, I watched him in 2019, late in the year against the Patriots. And the first half, he looked terrible. And I'm like, man, did they swing and miss on this kid? Are they going to be in the market for a quarterback? And then a year later, he's as good as anybody and making plays that, very few quarterbacks can make. So Tua, I think they certainly did the right thing this offseason. Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle, again, continue to work on their offensive line to give them pieces. And now I think they're at a point where I'd say by the second half of the year, I think we should have a good idea whether Tua is able to be that guy that can keep them in the hunt and make them a playoff team like they should be, or if, they're going to say, boy, we really would have liked Justin Herbert if we could do a do-over, but right. It's way too early for me to say like he can't do it. I saw too much of him at Alabama that I liked, and I even saw moments last year that I liked. So, let's slow the rush on him.
And of course, the Patriots open the season against the Dolphins. They also end the season against the Dolphins. But he's coming off the COVID year where he had no off season. So but Justin Herbert was able to do what he did with the Chargers, and so that is what works against the perception of Tua. Well, Justin Herbert was able to do it, but and it's so I can't imagine a rookie quarterback last year without having any on-field off-season work at all with any coaches or anything, and being able to do much.
No preseason games.
Yeah. I mean, just so many things stacked against him. I remember having a conversation with Josh McDaniels talking about Stidham. That was Stidham's second year, and he was the only quarterback here for a little while, right before they signed Cam late. And he's like, "There's only so much you can do." Like if you look at how many players weren't able to make the leap that I think, especially going from year 1 to 2, which I think a lot of coaches will tell you that's when you see the biggest level of improvement in guys, they didn't get that opportunity. So it's like, that was, I mean, it was a tough deal for everybody across the board, sports, non-sports, whatever. But you wonder for certain players, the window closed on them because of what happened last year, not having that opportunity to be able to show what they were capable of. It was definitely very difficult. And with Tua, there was a big thing last week. He throws 5 interceptions in mandatory minicamp, and it's like, oh my God, is this the sign of? And I loved what Brian Flores said afterwards, and it's actually something I've heard many times here in New England. Like, hey, this time of year, we want guys to see what they can do and what they can't do. What works? If I throw back shoulder to this guy, can he make the sight adjustment? Can he make the play? And we're not talking about that aspect of it. He threw the pass. Well, was the receiver not in the right place? Can he not? Is he trying to figure out whether this guy can be trusted or not? Or is he trying to figure out, hey, does my arm, can I, against this defensive back, an elite guy, Byron Jones, can I squeeze it in there? No, okay, I can't. Well, what better time to figure that out than in the summer when it's not wins and losses than to do it in September, October, November, et cetera. So Flores was like, I want him to be aggressive. I want him to keep trying stuff. Let's figure it out so that when we go into the season, we know what we can and cannot do.
All right, I got one more question for you. I saw you were reporting on the Titans, and so what effect does Julio Jones have on Tennessee?
A massive effect, even if he's 85% of Julio, and obviously he's actually been pretty durable except for last year, where he dealt with the hamstring. But they lost Jonnu Smith, their tight end. They lost Corey Davis to free agency. They had AJ, and that's it. If you looked at their roster, they signed Josh Reynolds via free agency. He's probably going to be their slot guy. But if they were going to go 3 wide receivers, it was probably going to be Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Do you know who he is? Not too many people do. And look, he impressed them in special teams. He had a few catches last year. Maybe he's, diamond in the rough. But, I mean, he's not Julio Jones. Automatically now you're playing pick your poison with that defense. Do we want to go heavy box because of Derrick Henry? Well, now you've got AJ on one side and Julio on the other. You're going to single them? You're going to double one of them? Then the other guy's getting single coverage. I mean, it changes the math for them in so many ways. And if he can stay healthy, I mean, I love AJ. If Julio can stay healthy, that offense could be just as good, if not better, more explosive than they were a year ago.
And Nick Westbrook-Ikhine had 3 catches for 33 yards last year.
Yep. Undrafted guy out of Indiana, Rhett Lewis. That's Rhett Lewis's boy.
Oh, okay. There you go.
All right, Giardi. I got one more as well. You track the entire league. Give me a couple teams or one team you think is kind of under the radar. Do you have a team in mind?
Let
me give you mine.
The Dallas Cowboys.
Let me give you mine. I like the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are a little under the radar. The Bears and the Chargers. I was just looking at some over-unders, and those were some of the teams that stuck out to me. Is there a team that you think is going to be better than most are expecting?
I think Jacksonville is going to be better than most people expected.
Okay.
And I know there's hype around them because they drafted Trevor, and obviously people are going to be watching that. I just, there's a sort of good vibe coming from there. And like, I'm not predicting playoffs or anything like that. Maybe they're a 6-win team, but I'm guessing that the over under is not, it's probably 4 if I had to guess. And I just think that there's some pieces in place, and you're already getting rave reviews from some of the wide receivers who are like,
Laviska Shenault.
Yeah.
He's
You know, like
guy.
I love Laviska, love him. I think that's going to be a really fun team to watch. And I think they might surprise some people, you know, knock off a couple teams that, you know, maybe you wouldn't have expected them to. I actually think the Jets are going to be better. The division is tough. You're hearing good things about Zach, and I like sort of their approach, you know, like they didn't have, I mean, like there's a million things that went wrong with the Sam Darnold era there, but they didn't do Sam any favors. I mean, Sam didn't do himself any favors either, but like they didn't surround him with enough. They didn't protect him. They were already trying to build the wall in front of Zach. And I look at something like last week, you know, they redo Jamison Crowder's contract. Like a lot of people, including some people maybe in New England, thought that he might shake free and be cut. They got a good slot receiver back for a 1-year deal. They made it work. And like that's what you need to do. You need to give the guy, Zach Wilson, the 2nd pick overall, give him as many pieces as possible to give him a chance to be successful. I think that's smart business by the Jets. I mean, that division's going to be brutal. So I don't know if it'll translate into wins and losses, but I think they're going to be a more competitive football team than they were at any time under Adam Gase.
I thought it was interesting. Well, we both covered, everyone's covered the league, you guys more than me. But here we are in June, right? And we already know the 2 biggest selling jerseys in the league, don't we? Like Tim Tebow with the Jags, number 1.
Yeah.
Mac Jones, number 50 with the Patriots, number 2. Like here we are.
Cody, you got to go renegade, start a little website and start selling like number 50 jerseys and t-shirts. I think you're onto something here, like the throwback style. So when Mac becomes a star, they go, remember that time in training camp where he was rocking 50?
Yeah, that's going to be huge in July.
Okay, so what are the plans for training camp? I'm going to be in Oxnard, California. I don't know for how long, but for a good while. I know you typically in a normal training camp, Mike, you would be traveling around all over the place, right? What's the plan this year?
Yeah, I don't know that we know the plan just yet. Although I would say that based on my experience at the NFL Network, and especially with this situation that the Patriots find themselves in, you know, with the potential changing of the guard at quarterback, I could see myself spending maybe less time on the road and more time in Foxborough, which, you know, it's 15 minutes from my house, so I'm not going to complain too much about that, you know? So, but it's good. There's a lot of interesting storylines. Like, you know, who's going to be, Pelissero's probably going to be camped out in Green Bay, right? Just waiting for Rodgers to not show up, what's going to happen there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be worth watching. And once again, why this league is now, you know, 365, 24/7.
Yep. I hope to be traveling around. Last year, I think I only went to 1 team. I think I only went to the Eagles last year for training camp, which normally
15 minutes from your house.
Right, exactly. 15 minutes. Giardi, you know how it is. Like normally we're covering 7, 8, 9, 10 different teams over a 3-week span. Like there have been times where I'll be gone from home for a week or more. I'll come back for 1 day, do my laundry, then back on the road for another week. And so I'm not exactly sure how the season's going to go this year with COVID and all that stuff. But truthfully, that's my favorite time of the year because I get to hang out with guys like Giardi. I've been up to New England, spent a week there with him a couple of years ago. You know, you name it, Tom Pelissero. We have so many great reporters at the NFL Network. And this is our one chance, or at least my one chance, to really see everybody and reconnect. And truthfully, it's my favorite time of the year, training camp. Giardi, I'm assuming you're the same one.
Oh, I love it. I love the, you know, like when you bounce around too, like just the atmosphere in different places and comparing it to where I'm usually at, going to other places. And you find the players are just, if they're not completely beaten down by the heat, you know, like they're in a pretty talkative mood because again, it's not, the pressure is not there just yet. You know, you're not in regular season mode just yet. Guys are trying different things. You're getting excited about, you know, some of the draft picks or whatever. I enjoy that period. And I like watching guys and sort of identifying, you know, like Laviska last year, like there was this thing, like there's this buzz about Laviska and it played out during the course of the season. I like seeing guys like that at their infancy, you know, at the beginning stages and then see what they can become.
I don't know. I don't know that fans can understand how much they missed out last year just on learning the personalities of players and so forth. Because we hear media tweeting complaints about, wait, I can't do this, can't do that. But the real loser on that are the viewers, the fans, who aren't able to hear the stories about certain players because we don't have access to them, whether it be in training camp or during the regular season when we're just doing Zoom interviews all the time and we're just at the mercy of who the PR department makes available to us.
Right. I mean, I go back like the Patriots second year guys, the draft picks from last year, Uche and Kyle Duggar. I've never met any of those guys in person. Everything has been via Zoom. Patriots don't do on-field post-game interviews, even socially distant ones. So like, I've never actually been able to say, here's my hand, or fist bump, whatever, elbows, whatever you want to do these days, and be like, hey, I'm Mike Giardi from the NFL Network, and like we haven't had that moment yet. So I'm kind of looking forward to getting back to that too, and just being able to sort of put your face in front of a guy and just say, hey, what's going on? Like it's been such a weird year in that regard, and I'm kind of looking forward to getting some sense of normalcy and get those relationships started again.
Well, Giardi, as we wrap it up, I'll just say a couple things. Number one, I know Bill Jones is going to want you back as many times as possible because we've talked about Rex Burkhead and Laviska Shenault in the same podcast. Those are like his two favorite players.
I love Laviska. I'm right there with you. I love him.
Mike, I have a big green scouting notebook that I put together every year leading up to the draft. It's like a notebook like this. That's how I study for the draft, and because I do preseason games and cover that. That's my time of the year. I look at it as this is my college course, and so I don't go old school, filling up a notebook with notes about all these players and stuff. And Laviska was one of my guys when he came out, and Rex Burkhead, Dante Hightower was. I wanted the Cowboys to draft Dante Hightower when he came out because he had all those attributes that Bill Belichick looks for in a player.
Yeah, he would have been a good Cowboy.
Yeah. All right. Well, how about a fist bump or an elbow for Mike Giardi? You hit a home run there, Cody Winstead.
Hey,
don't tell Babe this, but I kind of like the Mike Giardi interview.
All right. Well, yeah. So we'll bring Giardi back again. Hey, as we wrap it up, Giardi, hey, thanks so much, man, for your time. You're a great dude, one of my good friends, and I appreciate it. Bill Jones, we'll get going next week on Jonesing for Football. Have a good week, both of you guys, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys.